This is Mindset for Success with your host, Dr. Leslie Knutson. Each week, she will interview women entrepreneurs to explore the unconscious psychological struggles they faced as they build their businesses and how they overcame them. Here's your host, Leslie Knutson.
Welcome, Nicole. I'm so happy and excited to have you as a guest today.
Thank you so much for having me, Leslie. I'm really happy to be here.
Nicole, you have a great and interesting introduction. You are Dr. Nicole Lipkin is an internationally recognized organizational psychologist, executive coach, speaker, and CEO of Equilibria Leadership Consulting, a leadership and organizational development firm. She's also the founder of Hey Kiddo, which builds leadership, social, and emotional skills in kiddos and their grown-ups. She has also shared her expertise on NPR, NBC, Forbes, Entrepreneur, and other media outlets. And she's the author of 2 best-selling business books. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
As Nicole, as you know, it takes a lot to be a successful female entrepreneur, and business acumen is, of course, important, but we rarely talk about the psychological issues that women often face to achieve that success. And I refer to those as those negative and sometimes persistent thoughts that can create doubt, undermine success, and can destroy self-confidence and risk-taking. Not to mention, it makes one's life not necessarily overall very happy and satisfied going through those negative moments. So I wonder if I could start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your journey to become an entrepreneur. And it has a lot of fast-moving pieces, starting in childhood up to now. Tell us a little bit about why you did what you did and when you did.
Sure. So I would say my entrepreneurial journey was hoisted upon me by my parents. So my parents were school teachers in the South Bronx, and they were super cool teachers. And this was, during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they were the type of parents that went in, and at that point, the South Bronx was tough. And they went in and they would go in early and be the teachers eating breakfast with the kids early in the morning. And they were incredible people, and they raised us in the suburbs of New York, in Westchester, New York, and you can't do that on teacher salaries. So on the weekends, we would go to flea markets and antique shows and sell jewelry, because that was my grandfather's business. And it was very hard being having to drag yourself out of bed like 5 o'clock in the morning to go work. Rather than watching Saturday morning cartoons. And when I was 5 and my brother was 11, they were like, enough complaining, stop. And they gave us $400. They took us down to the wholesale district in New York. They said, what business do you want to be in? We said toys. So that's where they took us. We bought our inventory. My dad taught us how to keep the books, and he was a math teacher. My mom was an English teacher and an artist. So she taught us kind of how to carry ourselves, how to market ourselves. And my grandfather was a salesman. He taught us how to sell. So we were in business at 5 and 11, and I loved it. It was so fun running our own thing. And we had all of these ups and downs and screw ups and mess ups. But my parents were the type of folks that, wouldn't jump in and solve it. They would help coach us through it and try to listen to the way we were thinking and coach us through problem solving. It was really an incredible experience. And from that, I had my little golf ball stand. Like, I did a bunch of different little things. I loved creating my own things. So, as I grew up, I also realized I was going to make a horrible employee because I worked for myself since I was a little girl. And unfortunately, my parents passed away when my brother and I were young. I was my dad when I was 12, my mom when I was 19. But interestingly, they really, I think my life could have gone in a very different direction. But the skills they taught me and they ingrained in me, that resilience, that perseverance, the understanding thinking, critical thinking, all of that really helped my life go into a great direction to where I am now. So those are such important early lessons. So I ended up, in college, I was a dance major and a psych major, and I wanted to be a dancer and an actress, but I chickened out and I ended up, I ended up going the more safe route, and I went and got my doctorate. And I had really diverse interests when I was in grad school. Just all through my life, I had very diverse interests. I was always interested in a bunch of things. And so I got my doctorate, I got an MBA, and I got a criminal justice degree because I really wanted to go into the FBI because I loved the X-Files and I wanted to marry Agent Mulder. Had the biggest crush. And I also loved business. So my early career, just because of my internships, I fell into the forensic route, and I loved that work, absolutely loved that work. And so early on, again, like I said, I knew I was never going to be a great employee. So the early jobs I had, I was learning about business and learning how to run a practice and all of those details. So I opened up my first business, Equilibrium Psychological and Consultation Services, in late 2004, early 2005. And that was a clinical and a forensic practice. And that started growing. It never intended for that to grow, but it ended up growing pretty rapidly into a group practice, meaning other therapists came under the umbrella. And now today it's a 50 plus therapist practice. My leadership team running it. It's a very big business, but it's very solid in the Philadelphia community. But around 2007, I was just like, I don't want to do forensic work anymore. I loved it, but I just was very burned out by attorneys and judges. And it's hard. It was just, I don't know. I loved the clients. I was done. And I loved business. So I wanted to transition into organizational psychology, executive coaching, leadership development. And I'd been doing some of it here and there. So I went back and I got certified as an executive coach. I figured I didn't need it because of my, again, the PsyD and the MBA, and I'd taken I'd done the organizational psych track during grad school. But I was like, I haven't been immersed in it for a while. So I did that, and I'm really glad I did. And from there, I started growing Equilibrium Leadership Consulting, which was a much more difficult business to build. The psych practice, once we were established and the reputation started to build and referral streams, it grew in an organic, healthy way. But even with leadership consulting, I thought I would just put out my shingle and there it was, but that was very hard because it's a very crowded space. And it's very much about credibility and people knowing you. And interestingly enough, it wasn't until my first book was published that I was able to actually start gaining credibility and doing speaking and getting in front of people. So Equilibrium Leadership grew. And then I always had this desire and dream of, just from my experiences with my parents and how they raised me, like just the social, emotional, and leadership skills that they instilled in me and helped me, really discover and develop over time, and their patience with it. I just always really felt that should be a gift that every child has and every child is given. And I realized how lucky I was that I was given that opportunity. And so I always had this dream that I wanted to, and especially doing leadership development work and all over the world and executive coaching and working with executive teams. Like, I realized that these are not skills that everyone gets or has or develops. And I realized the importance, like, we need to get to them earlier in life, not once you're out in the professional world. So I had this dream about building something that would help build the leadership, social, and emotional skills of kids and also of their parents, to model it at home. And that's how Hey Kiddo was born. Hey Kiddo was originally a Young Leader Project. And we won a grant with the Young Leader Project from the National Science Foundation. And following that research and development, Hey Kiddo emerged. And it was a new startup that actually we launched everything right when COVID was escalating, which was not a great time to launch. So it's a small startup. We're pre-revenue because because COVID was escalating, I couldn't charge for it. I wanted to just help. We actually just started charging, but we have 2 products with that company, Hey Kiddo. One is a coaching subscription that's delivered via text to parents, giving them activities, conversation starters, and coaching tips to help them develop these skills in their kids and themselves. And then one is that's Hey Kiddo Talk. And then Hey Kiddo Huddle is a social emotional curriculum, 15 minutes a day. Anyone can do it, whether it's homeschooling parents or educators, but it's kind of like a no prep, just put it in place, start your kids' headspace off in the right place program, and the future is to connect them. So yeah, and it's interesting because in my journey, I was used to opening up and starting and growing service businesses. So when I came to the startup world, I'm like, yeah, I can do this. I've grown 2 businesses. I know how to do this. And I know how to develop teams and coach executive. Like, I can do this. Startup has blown my mind. It is such a different experience. So much harder.
Right.
So different, hard in a different way, hard and challenging in a different way. So yeah, that's my story of my professional life. Definitely have transitioned a lot.
In some ways, Hey Kiddo brings you all the way back to the beginning with your parents kind of giving you $400 and taking you into, I don't know, where in New York to decide what toys you wanted to buy, they really were teaching you all sorts of social, emotional skills, I guess leadership as well. You were given your own money to buy your own things. So a lot of being able to be an entrepreneur is to kind of go back on some of the upbringing stuff, which sounds like it was really important to you in terms of being able to get to where you are today.
And 100% full circle. Absolutely.
Full circle, absolutely. Yeah. Which is kind of nice, kind of a legacy to your parents. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Let me ask you, have you ever felt that you didn't fit in? And if so, how did you overcome the idea that you were maybe judged for not fitting in?
That's an interesting question. I haven't felt like I haven't fit in, but there's been a certain area in my life where I don't feel like I fit in. I have an enormous amount of drive and energy toward the things I'm energized to do. So where I feel like, and I like to do a lot of different things. Like I like having a ton of different balls in the air. So where I've kind of felt a little weird in my life, or a little bit different than others, or maybe judged at times, is the amount of different things that I do, and the different ideas I have, and wanting to go after them. So I think and it's interesting because when people have given me feedback, their immediate assumption is, oh, you're just doing all of this, so you don't have to cope with the loss of your parents. That's always been, and you have to understand, because I'm a psychologist, I have a lot of shrink-like friends.
Yeah, of course.
But that's never been and I don't get analyzed that way now, but I think earlier on I did. I mean, and it was a little abnormal. Like, I did 3 graduate degrees at the same time. Like, that's not normal. I have 3 businesses. Like, I guess I work in 3s, but the immediate assumption that it was, avoiding coping with the loss of my parents was never accurate, because I can remember as a little girl doing a million different things. I was a dancer. I did theater. I did ice skating. I did dance. I did a lot. I did fencing. I always did a lot. I always enjoyed having a lot. What I do think is that I think that having a lot of responsibility, again, having those early losses, having a lot of responsibility on my shoulders, or feeling that weight of responsibility, I think that shaped my tendency sometimes to persevere when I shouldn't be, or to show drive in a certain area where I shouldn't be, or taking on other people's stuff. And so I think there's that.
Yeah, and I wonder, I mean, drive clearly you have and have had for a long, long time. What about the piece of being able to listen to yourself and take care of yourself? Are you able to do that? Have you always been able to do that? Are you still working on doing that?
Yeah, I suck at that. I mean, like that's always been like, oh, I'm terrible at that. I'm really good at telling other people to do it. I will say I'm getting better. And like, I really do believe people are brought into your life for a reason. And, you know, I will say one interesting thing is my husband, Matt, we're so different when it comes to drive. And he's like, he needed a fire under his butt, and I need the fire dimmed down under my butt. And I think that's what we brought in his life. So I will say I've learned more from, you know, living with him and that relationship. I have learned more how to care for myself. I think the other thing is I have Charlie is my son, who's 20 months old. I had him later on in life, and he has also helped me start focusing. And it's been hard. Like I feel the mental struggle sometimes of like turning off and being present and like, and being as present there. But I think this combination has really made me reprioritize and like want the like be okay with just like sitting on the floor playing and for like an hour and really enjoying that. So I think these other influences in my life have helped me. It definitely, I will say that's a weakness of mine. It definitely hasn't been internal. It's been from other things outside helping me get there.
How about the experience of being rejected in business? Has this ever happened to you? And if so, what did you do to manage that emotionally?
Yeah. So I think, you know, I've had like, it's interesting because I had these early successes, like again, Equilibria Psych really organically grew, and it became a very successful business despite some of the things that despite some of my poor leadership mistakes. There's that. And poor choices I made. But I think that was an early success. And I think, and I'm going to answer your question about rejection. And I think like having a book published like that, and finding an agent, like that doesn't happen. That's usually a much harder process. It happened to be just good timing. It was a topic that was it was becoming hot. And so it was the timing. It wasn't me, it was the timing. But I think because I had that, the rejection parts felt deeper. So I'm like, it's supposed to all work out, right? So, you know, yeah, I've had plenty of rejections. I think growing Equilibria leadership has been really, really, really hard. And I think the rejections are a long fall there because you work so hard to get the business. And then if it doesn't pan out or the client goes to someone else, it's like a real stab in the gut because put so much into that relationship. Take Kiddo, talking about like startup and that entrepreneurial game, like that's rejection and failure constant. Like it is. But I do feel like over the years, I've developed a little bit of an iron gut for it. And I've also really worked on my mindset around it. Like I don't see rejection as failure. I really just see it as information. So I've really worked at having a very tough mindset around that because I can't, I think if anyone goes there with the ups and downs and rejection, because that's just part of business. It's part of leadership. It's part of taking risk. Like you're going to fall and you're going to fall on your face hard sometimes.
So for our young listeners, you would say in terms of rejection in business, it's normal. It's going to happen. Yeah. And what other sort of action steps can you give them to kind of work through that?
Well, I think it's a lot about reframing. Again, if you're going to associate rejection with failure and you have a really negative association or relationship with failure, it's going to take a lot of emotional energy from you. If you can reframe it as information, for what's working and what's not, and you can also kind of look at it as really useful feedback, probably the most useful feedback to help you think deeper, to think more strategically, to really work through, okay, why is this happening? How is this happening? What did I do to contribute this? It creates this like amazing relationship with the crap part of business, the negative side of business. Like it becomes like, I actually really like it becomes this fuel for not only your personal self-awareness, but the self-awareness that's required when creating a business or creating a product, you require the feedback is imperative. Mm-hmm. So I think it's adjusting your relationship and how you see it. It's this stuff is so useful.
And using it more as information to build on your next success step to be successful, as opposed to seeing it as really undermining your ability to go forward.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is we're surrounded by all of this. We're surrounded by feedback constantly, not just verbal feedback, but just like how people relate to us, customers choose to be with us, choose not to be with us, fundraising rejections, all that stuff gives us such vital information to adjust and to mold and evolve. And like the cool thing is we get to evolve until we die. So if you're not evolving, you're dead. So like, again, this is so useful in growth, and entrepreneurship is not for everyone. This is a hard journey. It's a constant look in the mirror. It's constantly, I find you have to keep your emotions in check and constantly look at it with a lens of self-awareness.
So let's talk about emotions in check. How have you ever faced business decisions where maybe you were too emotional?
Oh my God.
And however, how did you face this, and what did you learn from the situation and maybe brought forward in your recent business decisions?
Well, I think the best example for my personal experience happened with Equilibria Psychological. So when I first started growing that business into a group practice, I think people in my field, like psychology, I think it can be kind of weird. So I didn't want to work with weird people. Like I wanted to bring in people that were down to earth and cool and all that. So I brought in my friends who were therapists that wanted to start building their own practices. And that was great. Like the positive side of that was that we all love each other so much. So the cultural thing, like you, as a client, you would walk in there and like, you would feel the love. Like it was, and people were really down to earth. And it was fun. It was great. The bad part about it is when you're, I was the owner of the business. Like it was my butt on the line. And I was making decisions based on my relationships and my emotions and feelings for people versus logical, thoughtful decisions that would help the business thrive. Because if the business thrives, the people thrive. So like I did stupid things like, once we got on insurance panels, because again, this is in the city in Philly, like it's a big enough practice. We had to start getting on insurance panels. I would pay my therapist regardless of if I got paid or not. So what that means is that all of a sudden, like, that sometimes therapists wouldn't collect co-pays because they felt bad, or wouldn't write their notes on time. And so we couldn't submit, like, and then all of a sudden it was too late and insurance companies wouldn't pay. Like, you don't do that. That's a terrible, stupid thing to do.
Right.
And so I was finding myself, like I was making these decisions that were emotional based on what I thought people wanted. And meanwhile, I was losing it. I was like, again, I hated the business. I hated it. I found it to be a burden. I started resenting all my friends that were working there because they were perfectly fine. While I was like, oh my God, where am I going to get the money to pay the bills? It was just so illogical. So it was totally based in emotion. And it was funny because I built it up in my head. Eventually I changed that model, but I built up in my head that it was going to be the biggest thing in the world. Like when I did it, they were like, why didn't you do this years ago? What's your problem? Like, that was so dumb. Like, okay, thank you. So what I've had to do, so there's examples of that. There's also examples of not firing people well past their expiration point, like when they just weren't a fit, but, feeling bad that there were like, having family problems or this or that. Like, I've just always let in the past emotion get in the way. And I do sometimes now, or my, wanting to take care of people. Like, I'm definitely a nurturer. So I have to be so, like today, I have to be so prudent, so careful that when I start feeling that creep up, because I being aware of it, I now know the red flags that happen in my brain and my body when it's starting to creep in that direction. So I just have to pay such vigilant attention to when that's starting to happen, because it always leads to a really bad business decision. So I just want to be vigilant.
Thank you very much. Believe it or not, we're coming to the end of our podcast. But lots of great personal stories and also inspirational sort of journeys to share with our listeners. I want to thank you very much for coming on today, and wish you lots of luck in all of your new inspirational journey adventures. Can you tell me where people can reach out to you if they want to learn more about your work?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So you can email me. You can go to actually the websites to email. That would be easiest. So you can either go to www.hey-kiddo.com. That's HEY-kiddo.com, or Equilibria Leadership, which is EQUILIBRIA leadership.com. And I answer the emails on the contact us form.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicole.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
This podcast is brought to you by Women Entrepreneurs Global, the first startup studio and digital DIY startup platform for women. For more information on her guests, this podcast, and many other female founder programs, please visit womenentrepreneurs.global. We believe in open and non-stigmatizing dialogue about the hidden psychological difficulties experienced by many successful entrepreneurs and highlighting the strategies used to overcome them, such as the fear of failure, of not being good enough, and that loud, chattering internal critic is critical to helping other founders achieve success. Please join her next week for more Mindset for Success stories. That was Dr. Leslie Knutson, and you can drop her a line at dr.leslieKnutson@dr.leslieKnutson.com.